The courtroom in Toledo, Ohio, held a chill that seeped deeper than the air conditioning's hum. It wasn't just the cold vents making people shiver. It was the way they looked at Amani Jefferson, like she was something delicate and distant, a fragile figure behind an invisible barrier. She sat motionless, hands tightly laced in her lap, wrapped in the same mustard yellow cardigan she always wore when her nerves ran high. Her foster mother had ironed it the night before, even though Amani had said it didn't matter. But maybe it did. 12 years old, not even 5 feet tall. Eyes the color of honeyed amber. Too steady, too knowing for someone her age. The courtroom wasn't full. A couple of reporters, a handful of caseworkers. Her foster parents, Deborah and Stan Greer, sat quietly on the left side of the room. Across the aisle, a woman in a crimson blazer, her curls pinned tight, clutched a tissue in one hand and a manila folder in the other. Her name was Celeste Boone, Amani's biological aunt. She'd only seen her twice, once during a monitored visit and once at a diner where Celeste had spent most of the time arguing with the waitress over the temperature of the fries. Amani didn't want to be here, not in this room, but she understood deeply why she had to be. At the bench sat Judge Gerald Norwood, a man in his 60s, silver hair neatly combed, reading glasses dangling from his neck like a stethoscope. He looked at Amani not as a child, but as a misplaced puzzle piece on a board he thought he knew well. "Miss Jefferson," he said, shuffling through papers, then leaning in just a little. "I know this is out of the ordinary. It's not typical to have a child testify in a custody matter." "I understand," Amani answered, her voice even and unwavering. The judge paused, slightly startled by her composure. She didn't squirm, didn't falter under his gaze. No shifting eyes or trembling hands. She sat with the calm of someone who had lived this moment in her mind again and again, who had already mapped out the battlefield. The room shifted, a cough, a pen clicking, the brief buzz of a silenced phone. Norwood cleared his throat. "You seem like a sharp one," he said, attempting to soften the air. "I bet you do well in school." "I do all right," Amani replied. He chuckled gently. "Humble too." Then after a beat, "Let's try something. Just to ease into things. Ever sneak a cookie before dinner?" Amani tilted her head, dissecting the question like a surgeon with a scalpel. "That's a leading question, Your Honor. You're implying that I have, rather than asking if I did." Someone in the gallery stifled a laugh. Norwood raised his eyebrows, amused. "Well then," he said, "how about a little game? Truth or lie, I ask, you answer." Amani looked around the courtroom once, not out of fear, but calculation, then nodded. "Okay, but I might ask questions too." He blinked. "Fair enough." But from the very first question, Judge Norwood realized this wasn't going to be a game. Amani hadn't come to play. She had come to take the pieces off the board. "All right, Miss Jefferson, truth or lie, you've stayed up past bedtime more than once this week." Without hesitation. "Truth. But I was reading the 2022 Ohio Family Law Journal." There was a soft ripple of chuckles. Less laughter, more confusion. Norwood leaned in. "Family Law Journal?" "Yes, sir," she replied. "It's available online. That's where I read about how the best interests of the child are central to custody rulings." The judge sat straighter. "All right then. Have you ever pretended to be sick to skip school?" "Lie," she said plainly. "I haven't missed a day since 3rd grade." That's when Celeste's attorney, Benjamin Rohr, all slick-back hair and self-assured glasses, leaned forward. "Your Honor," he began, voice clipped, "perhaps we could return to relevant—" Norwood raised one hand, silencing him. His eyes remained fixed on the girl in the yellow cardigan. Something had shifted. "Your turn," he said. Amani studied him for a moment, then spoke. "Truth or lie, you've already decided who I should live with." Silence fell. heavy and sudden. Even Roar leaned back. Norwood hesitated, then exhaled. Truth. I figured, she said. She turned slowly to her aunt. Celeste, now visibly stiff, sat up straighter under the attention. Truth or lie, Amani asked. You told the caseworker you could provide better than the Greers because you make more money. Celeste blinked. Truth, she said cautiously. Then why do the electric bills in your name show 4 late payments in the last 6 months? The courtroom didn't gasp, not dramatically, but the air shifted again. Celeste's mouth opened, then closed. Amani reached calmly into her tote bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Public records. I found them at the library. Roar stood sharply. Objection. It's relevant, Judge Norwood interrupted softly. Sit down, Mr. Roar. Amani turned back. Her voice never wavered. Truth or lie, a child's voice should matter in decisions about their own life. He looked at her, long and deep. Truth, he said at last. Amani exhaled. The tightness in her lap began to loosen. Then I'd like to speak. For real, no cookies, no games. Just the truth. The judge gave a solemn nod. You may speak, Miss Jefferson. She didn't rush, not because she was afraid. She was just aligning her words. Precisely, intentionally. I've lived in 6 homes in 7 years, she began, her voice steady. Some were okay. One had a dog who chewed my socks. One smelled like onions and baby powder. One locked their fridge after 5 p.m. There was no self-pity in her tone, no performance, just a series of cold truths laid bare. But the Greers, they're different. She glanced toward her foster parents. They didn't ask me what I've been through. They asked what I like to eat, what I like to read. They didn't treat me like a case file. Deborah Greer quietly wiped her tears. Stan's hand gripped hers beneath the table. Turning to her aunt, Amani said, You told the caseworker you should have custody because we share blood. But you never visited me until the court made you. Celeste shifted in her seat. I'm not angry, Amani continued gently. I'm just saying, I've been taking care of myself for a long time, so I know when people show up because they have to, versus when they actually want to. Norwood tapped his pen but said nothing. You want to know why I started reading about family law? She asked. He nodded. Because grown-ups kept making decisions for me without me. They'd sit in rooms like this one and say things like, she's too young to understand, or she'll adapt. Her voice softened. But I do understand. I know what stability feels like. I know what fear looks like. I know when someone's lying, especially when they smile while doing it. No one dared interrupt. I know this isn't just about who wants me, she continued. It's about who knows me, who sees me. She looked toward the Greers again. They know I hum when I read. They know I eat pizza backwards. They know I collect old bus passes and keep them in a shoebox because, I don't know, it makes me feel like the places I've been matter. That final line landed like a weight. Roar whispered something to Celeste, but she didn't respond. Then unexpectedly, Judge Norwood leaned forward and asked, How old were you when you learned how to read people like this? How do you learn to read legal documents? Amani looked the judge straight in the eye. I started with eviction notices. Judge Norwood blinked, studying her. His expression changed. Not pity, but something close. Recognition. He took a long breath and leaned back in his seat. All right, Amani. Thank you, that was... He checked his notes. Very helpful. Amani gave a quiet nod. I'm not finished. That caught him off guard. You're not? No, sir. I'd like to talk about one of the affidavits in this case. It's not truthful. The courtroom stirred. People leaned forward. Even Roar, the lawyer, shifted upright. Which affidavit? The judge asked. Amani reached into her tote bag and pulled out a copy of a document. This one, from Celeste Boone. She claimed she had a 2-bedroom apartment, But the lease shows it's a one-bedroom. So the only way she made room for me was by turning the living room into a bedroom. Celeste's cheeks turned red. That was a typo. It's more than that, Amani said. The lease is dated 2 weeks after she submitted her affidavit. The judge narrowed his eyes. Is this lease real? Yes, sir. The building manager gave it to me. I told him I was checking housing stability for the court. I used my school ID. The whispers in the courtroom fell away. No one was speaking anymore. Everyone was just watching, listening. But Amani wasn't finished. She was just getting started. For a moment, the silence filled the room. Not the awkward kind, but the kind that felt necessary, like everyone had been holding their breath. Amani sat still, lease still in her hand. She didn't look proud or smug, just sure. Her fingers shook slightly, but her voice hadn't, and that meant everything. Celeste Boone leaned back, arms crossed, eyes darting toward her lawyer, who now looked uneasy. He whispered something. She nodded, but just barely. Judge Norwood rubbed his temple with his pen. He glanced at the lease Amani had handed to the bailiff. Ms. Boone, he said carefully, is there anything untrue in this document? Celeste hesitated. Number. But I didn't mean to lie. I just didn't think it would matter. I made space for her, with a curtain between the bed and the kitchen. Amani asked softly, more curious than angry, do you sleep there too? Celeste looked away, said nothing. That was the thing about silence. It didn't always mean guilt, but sometimes it was louder than words. Then the judge shifted his tone. Amani, he said, you've clearly done your homework. Very impressive. But what about the emotional part of this? Maybe your aunt just wants a chance to reconnect with her family. Amani nodded. Maybe, but reconnecting doesn't mean uprooting. It means visiting, calling, sending birthday cards even when there's no court date. That's what reconnecting looks like. The words hit harder than she expected. Celeste opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. I know people say blood is thicker than water, Amani continued, but water keeps me alive. I don't need people who just look like me. I need people who see me. That was when Deborah started crying, openly, quietly. Stan pulled her close. Roar finally stood. Your Honor, this is turning into an emotional performance. It's not about who speaks the best. This is about facts and ability. But the judge didn't even look at him. He looked at Amani. She folded her hands and asked, May I ask one more question, Your Honor? He nodded. Truth or lie, she said. Have you ever had to grow up before you were ready? Norwood stared at her. He didn't answer. Just closed his eyes for a moment, like the weight of the question had found him. Outside, the sun was shifting. That late afternoon light stretched through the courtroom windows and crept across the floor, like it was reaching for something solid to rest on. Amani wasn't trembling anymore, but she could feel the pressure of every eye in the room. The judge leaned forward again. This time his voice was slow and firm. Miss Jefferson, he said, I have to make my ruling based on what is best for your long-term safety and well-being, emotionally, financially, physically, not just what looks best in court today. I understand, she said, but I needed to speak today, not to win, just to be heard, because sometimes the truth gets lost under too much paperwork, and people forget there's a human being inside the file. Celeste finally stood for the first time since the hearing began. She looked straight at Amani. I didn't show up sooner because I didn't know how. I wasn't ready to be anyone's guardian. I was still figuring out my life. Amani nodded. I know. That's why I'm not angry. I just can't afford to be someone else's learning curve. The room dropped into silence again, the kind that makes you feel small, even when you're not the one being judged. Norwood turned to Deborah and Stan. Mr. and Mrs. Greer, would you like to speak? Deborah shook her head. Stan cleared his throat. His voice cracked. We came here ready to fight for her, but she fought for herself. That says more about her than anything we could have said. The words hung in the air. Heavy. Real. The judge turned back to Amani. You've read a lot of legal documents, haven't you? Yes, sir. Then you know this decision won't be made today. I'll need to review the evidence and reconvene. I understand, she said, standing. But at least now, you see me. That's all I wanted. She packed the lease back into her tote like it was a book she'd borrowed from the library. But it wasn't just a paper. It was a shift. She walked back to the gallery, quiet but steady. No one in that courtroom would forget her now. The court recessed, but no one moved. Not right away. It was like standing up too fast might break the moment. The judge left. The clerk followed. The only sounds left were a chair creaking and a pen scratching paper. Amani sat between Deborah and Stan again, small but somehow the biggest presence in the room. Deborah leaned in. You okay, baby? Amani nodded. Yeah, just tired. Stan chuckled. You just cross-examined 3 adults and tore apart a housing claim in 20 minutes. That would wear anyone out. Amani gave a tiny smile, then looked at her hands. Do you think he'll send me away? Deborah was about to answer, but Stan spoke first. No one's sending you anywhere without a fight. And from what I saw, you fight better than most grown folks I've met. Across the aisle, Celeste sat alone. Roar was on his phone. Celeste finally stood and walked slowly toward them. Amani, she said quietly. Deborah narrowed her eyes, but Amani looked up. I want to say something, not because I think it'll change the outcome, just because I should have said it before. Amani tilted her head slightly. I wasn't ready, Celeste said, and I lied because I thought it was better to look like I had it all together. But you made me realize truth matters more, even if it's messy. Amani didn't respond right away. Then she asked, why do you want me? The question hit hard. Celeste took a second. Because I didn't want my sister's child to grow up thinking no one in her family cared. That's not the same as wanting me, Amani said. Celeste nodded. I know. Deborah reached for Amani's hand but didn't pull her back. This moment belonged to Amani. If the court lets you stay with the Greers, I'll respect that, Celeste added. But I'd still like to visit. No court order, just you and me, when you're ready. Amani studied her aunt's face, like she was reading a document, not trusting it until she'd checked every line. Okay, she said. We'll see. Later in the hallway, Kendra, the caseworker, walked beside her. You did something rare in there, she said softly. Amani shrugged. I told the truth. Yeah, Kendra replied. But you didn't use it like a weapon. You used it like a mirror, made everyone look at themselves. Amani looked up. Isn't that the only way it works? Kendra nodded. She didn't look like a worker anymore. She looked like someone who just witnessed something important. Outside, the afternoon sun was low. Not brighter, not clearer, just honest. And that mattered, because what came next wouldn't just be up to the court. It would be up to Amani, too. 2 weeks later, a plain envelope arrived. No stamps, no drama, just her name, Amani Jefferson. Inside, the decision was clear and direct. The court granted permanent guardianship to Deborah and Stan Greer. There was no celebration, no cake, just a quiet moment at the Greers' kitchen table. Amani sat between them, the letter in her hand. I guess I don't need to pack my bag every night anymore, she said. Deborah gently touched her shoulder. That bag can stay empty. You're home now. Stan raised a glass of orange juice. To the girl who beat the system with truth and a tote bag. They all laughed, really laughed. Amani smiled, but her eyes stayed serious. Can we still visit Aunt Celeste if she wants to? Of course, Deborah said. You get to decide what that looks like. This isn't a wall. It's just the door you walk through. Amani nodded. She didn't need revenge or a pretty apology. She needed steadiness, and now she had it. The tote bag stayed under her bed. The shoebox with her bus passes kept growing. And one day she sent a handwritten note to Judge Norwood through Kendra at a community event. It read, "Thank you for not treating me like a kid who talks too much. Thank you for listening when it mattered. I hope more kids get the chance to speak for themselves, not just be spoken for. Also, I meant it about the cookies. I really never snuck one." No signature, just Amani. This wasn't a story about a girl who found a home. It was about a girl who already knew what a home looked like and kept speaking until someone finally listened. Because kids like Amani, they don't need us to talk for them. They just need us to hand them the mic and then step back.